So thank you everybody for being in the call. As I say, we have Wendy, Jordan, and Kristin today in the call. We are very fortunate that they are going to be sharing their experience with a project about numeracy for a pen pal project that they were doing. And I'm sure Kristin, Jordan, and Wendy will introduce themselves. But just to know, so you know, Wendy teaches grade 5 and 6 in the town of Churchill, Manitoba. Jordan is a grade 4-5 classroom teacher that is teaching right now in Golden, BC. And Kristin is a vice principal of numeracy for Rocky Mountain School District number 6. So thank you very much for presenting your project. And the idea, Jordan was telling us that you have already the guidelines of who is going to be talking. We will be here in this session until 4:13. So I will remind you like 10 minutes before, so we have time for questions, and maybe 2 minutes before 4:13, so we can wrap up the session. Thank you so much, and welcome to the presentation.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Lita. I'm just going to share my screen if I have the ability to do so. You'd think after 3 years I would be much more skilled at doing this. Is that working? That's all good? Okay, so by way of introduction, as Lita mentioned, my name is Kristin Insull, and I am originally from Manitoba. I moved here 3 years ago, and I am of Manitoba Métis with strong ties to the Red River Valley, which is where these photos are from, as well as the census information, and Swampy Cree in northern Manitoba, so not too far from where Wendy is situated. I moved out here 3 years ago, and so today I am coming to you from just outside Radium Hot Springs, British Columbia, situated in the Columbia Valley on the traditional unceded territory of the Ktunaxa and the Secwepemc people. And so we are very fortunate to live where we do with the diverse landscapes and the diverse people. I just asked for a couple minutes at the beginning, and then I'm going to throw it to Jordy and to Wendy, who have done the bulk of the work. We are also joined by Heather Taggart on the call, and if you read the write-up, you'll notice that at the very end, there's a brief allusion to a similar project to what Jordy and Wendy are going to share mentioned, and that's a project that Heather is working on in conjunction or in collaboration with a teacher from SD62 out in Souk. So we'll see where we end up for time, but Heather and Cynthia's project is taking on a little bit of a different flavor, and so we'll see if there's any questions that arise or anything that Heather wants to weigh in on. I see there's in the chat, is somebody else monitoring? Oh, I see. Okay, got it. I just didn't want to miss anything. So the project that we have to share with you today is a project that uses Richard Van Camp's "What's the Most Beautiful Thing You Know About Horses" as a mentor text. And where this project idea originated was kind of twofold. And one was that Jordy and Heather both are part of my grade 4 to 7 numeracy leaders here in the district. And so I've had the pleasure of working with them on a number of different occasions. And last year we did a pen pal project just across the district. And so we have a district that is 240 kilometers long. So geographically, we're quite separate. And so we have students who may never meet another student may never meet another student from a particular zone in our district. So we had a numeracy focused pen pals project. So that was kind of one piece of it. And then the second piece was when I opened up the book, and this is the second page. I don't know if you're familiar with the resource, but you can find folks that have read it on YouTube if you're not. But this is on the second page. And what precedes it is just the question, what's the most beautiful thing you know about horses? And then we have the reason I'm asking is that I'm a stranger to horses, and horses are strangers to me. And let me tell you why. And so as soon as I thought this, I spent a lot of time reflecting on the difference between where I lived in Manitoba, which was Winnipeg for 22 years before I moved out here, and where I live now, and the stark difference that exists in the landscape. And so this used to be my view 400 meters from my house back in Manitoba, you know, the canola fields and beautiful canola fields that cause springtime allergies. So this is my view, horizons for days, you know, the joke that you can see your dog run away for 3 days, 5 if you stand on a milk crate. And then I moved out here in 2021. And so these are all just iPhone pictures that I've taken from the last 3 years. And I think about what's the most beautiful thing I know about the mountains? What's the most beautiful thing I know about the waterways? What's the most beautiful thing I know about glaciers? Like I could go on and on and on and on, because the differences between my lived experience in Manitoba and my lived experience here, insofar as how I relate to the land, is just something that occupies a lot of my time when I'm driving up and down the valley. So that being said, my desire was to connect some teacher leaders that I work with and who I think just are phenomenal people, and selfishly I want to work with them. So that's why I asked Jordy and Heather to get involved, was to have their students connect with another classroom that has a very disparate geography compared to our own. And I happen to have a connection to a former assistant superintendent in the Frontier School Division. And I reached out and I said, hey, can you help me find someone? So that's kind of where my involvement mostly ends. And so Jordy and I met and we talked about some principles that I think Jordy will touch on a bit. And then Jordy tagged Wendy in, and the project has just grown from there. So my role in this is nothing more than to shine through a reflective glory and being able to celebrate some phenomenal work between teachers and students. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Jordy and Wendy.
Thank you so much, Kristin. Yeah, thank you so much for getting us together to collaborate on this project. We owe it to you for joining us. And I would like to offer to my colleague, Wendy. Wendy, if you're interested in starting off, you're welcome. Begin. Otherwise, chip in whenever you'd like to. What would you prefer?
Hi, can you hear me first of all?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I can start.
Great.
Okay. So I have a good afternoon, everyone. I am coming to you from Treaty 5 territory, traditional lands of the Dene, Cree, Inuit, and homeland of the Métis. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of the sharing circle. I am going to do my best to take you through the steps of the NPAL project. Thank you to Jordan for organizing everything with necessary details and timelines. He was helpful throughout if I needed assistance with anything. Eternal gratitude to him. Thanks also to Kristin, who reached out to my principal and got the ball rolling on this. So now with the project, I began with teaching the differences between qualitative and quantitative descriptions. I wanted to start with the routine the students were familiar with. So I did a think, notice, and wonder activity minus the think and wonder. Today, I just wanted them to notice. I showed a couple of photos, and as a class, students discussed what they noticed, and the responses were written on a T-chart. In one column, I wrote responses that were qualitative, such as literary devices and adjectives. On the other side, I wrote descriptions related to numeracy, like measurement of things measurement or things that can be counted. Students were then asked to identify why the descriptions were separated, what made each side unique. And they were able to recognize that one side was related to math, and the other side included describing words, mostly using the senses. During a math block, the next step was identifying the differences between these kinds of descriptions, specifically using examples of both qualitative and quantitative writing. I showed a couple of videos giving clear examples of each, and then we followed up with giving our T-chart the proper headings of qualitative and quantitative. To further strengthen understanding, I created assignments on Seesaw related to this lesson. Now, while all this was going on in the meantime, during our regular writing blocks, students began writing their NPAL letters, which are a lot like pen pal letters. We used a simple template for the draft copy. The information students shared included cool things about our community, interesting things about our school, the students' specific interests and personalities, and finally questions for their NPAL. For the next lesson, which I did during math block, it was time to introduce the book, Richard Van Camp's What's the Most Beautiful Thing You Know About Horses. We paused throughout to identify descriptive passages and to talk about the characters in the book and what they loved about horses. We spent time talking about our own feelings and connections with horses, which we don't have around here, but some students were able to share their own feelings about horses. Then the big part of the project was ready to begin. Their letters were finished. So now it's time to start their own beautiful thing piece of writing. Students were asked what were some special things about Churchill? What could a person write about? It could be an animal, kind of plant, landscape, etc. And I have the list here. I don't know how well everybody can see that. Okay, so a few things like beluga whales, Hudson Bay, polar bears, of course, northern lights, cloudberries, Arctic tern, fireweed. So after the list was generated, students had to choose one thing they felt most attached to. What a blessing that they all chose something different. They did not have to choose from the list if they wanted to come up with something on their own. Jordan kindly sent a sample of his own writing entitled, "What's the most beautiful thing you know about a cedar tree?" I read this to the class and promised to do my own for the next day. After trying to decide between lichen and Arctic hare, I chose Arctic hare based on this guy. So this is right outside my classroom window. This happens frequently, but it never gets old. I shared my written piece and now the letters were completed. That part should have been taken out. The letters were already completed. Okay, so the qualitative writing part was done rather quickly. No issues, because with a student teacher and myself, they had lots of practice writing descriptive paragraphs. The challenges came with the quantitative part. I knew this would be difficult because I had trouble myself. Luckily, because I have a very small class, I met with each student to talk about how we could describe their subject mathematically, most specifically using terms related to measurement. With lots of support, students all managed to finish. The letters and their beautiful thing descriptive written pieces were then sent to our NPALs. From doing this project, I am learning that I need to identify how often math language is used in our everyday lives, and we might not even recognize it. In curriculum, I'm more aware of it now when teaching solar system. I used examples today, and World War II. I am noticing so many mathematical references now. So how do I take what I have learned and expand it further? Just today, I spoke with some students about hunting and how they could include math in their descriptions. They came up with words such as trajectory, angles, bullet weight, tracking, footprint, width, depth, and length, animal size, and weight. This prompts me now to have a conversation with our language and culture teacher about how I can connect Indigenous teachings, land-based learning, and numeracy. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was so great to work with you on this.
Yes.
Totally. Okay, well, I'll jump in and try to catch up with some of the similar things from my end. Starting from the inspiration, it started with a meeting with Kristin and myself and kind of doing some brainstorming. And I think one of the first things she did to introduce was, show us the book. So I was immediately really curious. She gave me time to read it. And I think one of the first things that dawned on me as a very passionate mathematics teacher is that there's no equations. It's not what you would consider a mentor text for a standard math lesson. But when we dug a little deeper, we found that there's all these important values and mathematic competencies. So the math competencies that we really worked on in this project was, can you communicate mathematically and can you interpret other people's communication and drawings and writing that has mathematical language? Interpreting it is a very important part. Okay. Our district right now is making some new documents called the learning pathways. And we've noticed that in a lot of the mathematics that kids are doing, there's a really big emphasis on solving and calculating. And what we have less evidence and time spent on is interpreting situations, interpreting problems, interpreting our environment, and communicating in multiple ways, ways that we can show reverence and beautiful descriptions, but also being specific and being exact and using countable math-related ideas. So that was kind of the premise. And then Kristin and I very quickly started brainstorming some values. So why we were doing the work. We wanted to connect meaningfully with other people, and especially kids and teachers from across Canada in another place with a different landscape was pretty exciting. We wanted to broaden our perspectives of place, culture, and people. It was developing empathy and trying to see things from someone else's point of view. And I was really emphasizing to the kids, you're going to be receiving something that someone spent time to describe something they really care about. So that was the link there. Communicating with purpose. There was a lot more buy-in and engagement when students know that someone's going to be reading your work and you need to pick something connected to the land is what we did as a theme. And we thought about initially doing maybe everyone respond to what's the most beautiful thing about horses, but we found that our students, some students had a lot of connections and some didn't. So I think it was a good choice that we opened it up to let students choose themselves, and it kind of flourished from there. But it did take some reimagining. And for the kids, after we read the story of like, it was an amazing example of the beautiful descriptions, and we kind of had to add the mathematics part after that. So that's why I wrote the part about the cedar trees, to try to, no, you're kind of doing this, but this is what it's like. So I could share part of that. I'll read it out because I don't have it on this computer, but I wrote a quick one and kind of use the same style. So I learned about the word of a mentor text from a literacy teacher that taught us to use books to teach kids writing and reading from that back and forth perspective. We can read something and imagine how someone wrote it. Here's mine. What's the most beautiful thing about a cedar tree? Is it the tender brushing sound they make when wind gusts through them like the sails through a grand old ship? As I grew up as a kid playing lots in the forest, I always was on the hunt for the coolest stick. Some of the best cedar sticks have a gnarly burl, in high school, I began to carve cedar driftwood. And that was, I didn't get to finish, but that was my rich descriptions part. And then I tried highlighting for the students in a different color for the math part, just to, we really had to stretch their thinking of what's considered a math word or what's a math related idea, but anything countable. If they didn't know the fact, ask a question. I wonder how long, I wonder how far, I wonder how many are all math ways of viewing things. And that connects with Kristin, when we had that meeting, introduced a term that I'd heard before, but we talked about it some more. And since then, it's really become a major thing that I've been using. But the idea of two-eyed seeing, we wanted students to use this idea of having multiple perspectives, that we can look at the same thing using some of the mathematics that we've been practicing this year that, is maybe more classical or settler style like mathematics, but also we can look through an Indigenous lens. And there's a lot of rich value that we might not have known is there and skimmed across without going deeper. So I use some literacy strategies that are in kind of the SMART sequence program developed by Susan Close. And it's a way of, I went through the book quite slowly and got to do lots of predictions about each page, and we talked about symbolism and how the artwork and the colors can also bring out meaning and have that behind it as well. We did a chunk analysis. So that's where I typed up all the words and then I got rid of some of them and had students kind of guessing and predicting, what do you think is this about, and kind of filling in, really building meaning. So that I think helped with the beginning, rich descriptions part. And then another breakthrough that we kind of stumbled into was students had picked their own topic of what they were going to describe to a student in Churchill. And we had all kinds. I had a couple students, what's the most beautiful thing you know about dirt? There was the sky, there was clouds, there was manatees. Golden doesn't have manatees, but hey, if you know lots about them, hey, go for it. But what really helped is I had them using a math journal and they were brainstorming. What are just spitballing ideas, write down as many as you can. And after about 20 minutes, half an hour, some kids had like 3 or 4 ideas. And I was like, oh gosh, this is not enough to be able to describe it. So we did a little focus brainstorming where our students were sitting in pods of 4, groups of 4. And we said, okay, as a teacher, I'm going to get a timer out for 2 minutes. One person's going to go first. Tell your topic of what your item is. And for 2 minutes, the other 3 people in your group is going to pepper you with ideas and math-related words. And you frantically write down as many as you can. So later, when it's your turn to write about it, you have little jumping off points. You have ideas. So that helped give them. And then they were starting to brag. I've got 12 ideas. I've got 15 ideas. And then we really started to celebrate. But at the beginning, there was a little like anxiety of like, I don't know how tall a manatee is. Well, it's like, well, ask questions, use other ideas. But that's when it really surged ahead. And last week, our class got really excited to read the letters that we got from you, Wendy. And the kids are so excited. And ptarmigan, we had to look up, and I showed them pictures, and it was pretty fun. And today's lesson, they went through the descriptions that you wrote, and we highlighted all the math related terms. And after doing it themselves, they were much better able to like interpret and find those words. And what they would classify as math related was much wider than when we started this. So I've learned so much from just the value in kind of this more alternative lesson. There was no equations or solving, and we really celebrated oral descriptions too. If like a student was in that planning stage and having a hard time on paper, there were some amazing descriptions kids were able to tell just kind of from their heart of thinking about memories and connections and weaving that together. So it was a really neat project. I have a few little exemplars of some student works that I've taken some names out if people are curious of seeing what kind of things people did.
I was going to ask you for that. Yeah, I want to see the goods.
Sure. Okay, what can I dig up here? I'm kind of new to sharing, so I'm going to click on this green share button and give me some feedback. Layout. Whoa. Let's try that. There. Okay. Can you see my screen? The most beautiful thing about Esplanade Bay? Awesome. Okay. So Esplanade Bay is a place out around Kinbasket Lake, which is nearby Golden, a place where a lot of kids go to do some recreation camping. And this is a student who's used green to kind of classify some natural connections to the land, it looks like, and red, I think, is where he's using math-related ideas. Here we go. It looks like a lot of people are reading, but I'll slowly read behind as long as that's not too annoying. What's the most beautiful thing you know about Esplanade Bay? Is it that when the water is down, you can feel the wind down on the flats? Well, you think about how much does this lake weigh? Or who came up with Esplanade Bay and when was it created? So as the student was working on it, it led into some great little conversation of, could you find out how much of a lake weighs? Is it ever still, or is it kind of complicated because it's kind of emptying and filling at the same time? And we talked about rates and a lot of these conversations. It was good for that student because realized how complex that's a very complicated, almost calculus related question. And the great natural smell of the fir trees around. You can think of how old is the biggest tree. And well, you deep orange fire crackling behind while chopping wood. So I'll scroll down. People can kind of check out the bottom here. I think it's the kids' like first shot at it. So I think what we're looking at here is someone who treated it like a sandbox. And I'm proud that he was, exploring different ideas. I think you could refine it. And if kids had chances to do this again, it would be a neat thing to compare it from fall to spring, because I think there'd be a lot of growth. if you did it in different contexts in different ways. But, yeah, there's one example. I think I have one more I'd like to show. Okay. This is what's the most beautiful thing about butterflies. Only got started. It was a great start, and this is a student that was away for a little while, and we talked afterwards about the ways that they could push themselves further, that there was some big strengths, but needed to elaborate a little bit more and keep going. Yeah, so what, yeah. I guess the big thing of what I'm learning, and since this is the second time I've done a Numeracy Pen Pals project, is just how much it can affect the engagement when kids are writing to other kids, and like the purpose when they have a captive audience that they know it matters whether they can read your printing, and they want to hear about your life, and you can ask them questions about their interest in the letter, but also, tell them about the animals around Golden, tell them about our mountains, or some of those differences. Yeah, I think the value of communicating and interpreting is something that we really tried to lift of it. Math is not just your ability to go through procedures, but also your way of thinking and being. It's creative, and there's a big aspect of beauty that we wanted to share with kids. Where we're going next, I know Wendy might be a little too busy to send us a letter, but we're pretty keen to send you guys one. Yeah. So that's totally fine. I told the class today, but I think we're really keen to respond to the things that you thought were beautiful with us. And we're going to challenge ourselves to use a few more math words than we did the first time. So that's me for now. And I'd love to share the floor with Kristin or Heather if you'd like to add on.
I just had a few questions there, Jordy. That was great, by the way. Awesome job. You did it. You did it. Fabulous. So just thinking about our project, how long were your sessions, or like how long did this project take, and how did you chunk it up? Like 50 minutes and over? Yeah,
like 45-minute blocks approximately. And it took a while, like, especially since I did so much kind of predicting and the smart sequence stuff. I'd say we were heavily in it for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then I made a deadline, and it took about 3 more days for the last kids to finish up their, some typed it, some of my students printed it like on paper. And then I photocopied them because I wanted evidence for myself, but I also wanted to save a copy so that when students received it from a student in Churchill, they could also if they were, couldn't really remember how many math words did I use? It's not a competition, but could I push myself to add more next time, kind of a thing.
Yeah, that was our teaching partners, Wendy and Cynthia. That was something that we learned from that last pen pal group. That you keep a copy. You send the originals and the letters, and they're very special, but you keep a copy for yourself and the writer. And then
Jordy, do you want to unshare your screen so I can see everybody? There we go.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
All good. No, sorry, Heather.
No worries. My other question was, did you time slot it in math to really kind of stretch their minds and be like, whoa, this is math today? And you're probably like, this is fun.
Yeah, totally did that. Yeah. I'd say I used some language arts blocks with the letter writing. And we did one big idea brainstorming where I had 3 different chart pieces of paper and got the whole class to come up with a whole bunch of ideas for our town, then school, and then, questions about yourself. That was some language arts, but then the kids got a big kick out of, this is math. And there was some that were excited by that, and some that were a little that are strong in math. It took a little bit of alternative thinking, and it took a little while for them to kind of turn the corner, but I just had to be patient with them and hey, this is just something different. Different is good. Let's shake it up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then I had one more, again, sorry to take the floor, but I'm just learning, grabbing from what he's doing. Oh yeah, that's what, so when they respond, do you have a template? Like, could you just explain the response that they're going to write?
There's not a template yet, Heather.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so like today it was more like I wanted to kind of focus on interpreting. That's why we highlighted all the math words today. And then I think like it could be a shorter letter where I think we'll respond to the questions that were asked to us, and you know, maybe a few more wonderings about where the other student lived, like the other community. But then I think it'd be great if my students did like a response about the connection that their partner used. So if it's polar bears, seeing if I'm not sure how that's going to go, because there might be some animals that people don't know very much about or don't have as many connections for. But I thought it would be neat to kind of write back about their animal or something. Or they're not all animals. Some of them are plants, some of them are glacier or fire or wind.
Yeah, we'll have to think about this, but
Yeah.
about the part 2.
I have
Mhm.
some ideas, which
like
we
to
don't
hear.
necessarily have to share right here, but I have, because is everyone ready to hear what I'm doing? Or I can pause and we can wrap up here.
No, I'm ready.
Is that,
I want to honor, Heather, the work that you're doing, but I just kind of want to tag into
Me
a couple of
too.
things that Jordy said and what Wendy
Yeah.
said.
yeah, yeah.
This is the first time that I've actually been able to connect with Wendy on a forum other than email. So nice to put a face and a voice.
Yeah.
And really just incredible to hear, Wendy, what you did with your students and how that all came together. And because, you know, my family isn't, we never went further than really like Gillum kind of area, but like I can visualize kind of where you are and the richness of the landscape up there. And Jordy, like always a pleasure to work with you, and so proud of the work that you've been doing. So when Jordy and I met, I just wanted to tie into this concept of the principles of Indigenous story work that we talk a lot about in these circles. And primarily that we focused on the 4 R's. And so Jordy and I just went back and forth about the concept of respect and what does that mean as we bring the story into our classroom, because this isn't a story that we should read on a Monday and bring into our classroom on a Tuesday morning because we're super excited. And so we looked at that, you know, the basic concepts of making sure that we knew how to say the names, that we knew how to say the places, and that we knew who the author was and where he was from, and we knew where the illustrator was and where he was from. And I was in Jordy's classroom when he shared that with his students and situating where George Littlechild and Richard Van Camp both came from on a map. So the students had some familiarity there. Interesting, one of the students actually had a sticker on their water bottle from, I have it mixed up in my head now. I've been seeing too much about wildfires. Fort Nelson or Fort Smith? Anyway.
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, it's in the book. That's not really a demonstration of respect that I don't remember off the top of my head, but yikes, I will look that up. So we talked about respect. We also talked about reverence and that idea of awe, which is something that I think is naturally happening when we're talking about acknowledging the beauty of where we are, and the responsibility that we have in doing the work of being very familiar with this story, and how there might be little bits and pieces of the story that may be stumbling blocks. And I don't know if they were for Wendy or if they were for Jordy, because we haven't debriefed on this, but you know, you notice on that page, or maybe you didn't notice on that page that I shared with you, that Richard Van Camp refers to himself as an Indian. And what do we do with that? Because it's, you know, we know that this isn't a term that is typically used these days. And so we have 8 minutes. That's why I'm talking so quickly. Okay. So we talked about this concept of what do we do with the fact that there is a term that we would not accept our students using in the classroom, used in this book that we're accessing as a mentor text. And for one, the book was written in 1998, so we need to take it within the context in which it was written. Number two, it isn't uncommon from a lot of Indigenous people that I know, and even my own family, to use the term Indian. It's a term that in some circles is being reclaimed, right? And so we have to acknowledge that. We also know that the prevailing piece of legislation in the country is still called the Indian Act. And so we can receive a term inside of a resource or a story without taking it outside of that story and adopting it as our own. And so there was kind of that was one piece. Similarly, it uses the term creator. And in my work, when I've been having conversations with teachers about Indigenous story, there's been a bit of pushback about the use of the term creator, because they say, well, you wouldn't bring the story of Adam and Eve into the classroom. And that one's a little bit harder, right? Because in order to feel comfortable bringing a story involving creator into the classroom, I need to interrogate my own belief system and how I view Indigenous spirituality different from Christian theology. So basically, it was like this intense Friday morning with Jordy and I. We started it off by walking to the local bakery for an apple fritter and coffee, because that's the Friday morning special. And we went through just these like big ideas and grappling with just in preparation for if it becomes something that he needed to address in the classroom. And so we'll debrief at some point about whether these issues arose or whether there were things to think about. But there was a lot of that preparation and real thoughtfulness and care that went into this when I was working with Jordy. And so I'm going to take a deep breath, because that was a lot of information all at once. If Jordy or Wendy want to say anything, or if we want to toss it to Heather to bring it home with what's growing between SD6 and SD62.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning those R's. I also had reciprocity. I thought it was really cool that we were sending something back and forth. We were both giving and receiving, and responsibility we talked about.
Yeah, and the reciprocity also exists, for me as somebody who is finding my voice as an Indigenous curricular leader in the district. That reciprocity of like, I learn a lot by working with a teacher and exploring these concepts, and then maybe Jordy learns a little bit from me. I don't want to be so bold, but definitely has gone both ways.
Heather, do you want to add on?
Okay, well, I don't know. Do we have time? Because now I think we're at like 4 minutes. So yeah. Try for 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes. My partner and I are a little time crunch, the theme of right now as well. So our project looks a little bit different just due to that nature. But we started off with what's our vision for this? What's the purpose? And for us, it was gratitude. That's what we want our kids to walk away with, gratitude and connection. And so we're actually going to start off with a little anticipatory hook. I'm a graphic organizer fan, so we've got papers up the wazoo. So they're going to go outside to their land on the school ground, and that's our focus. We're going to pick an object that we think is beautiful, but we're just going to not put a lot of thought into it, just send them out there. What do you think is the most beautiful thing on our land or around our school? And then we're going to come back and read the story and dig deeper into that and provide a context. And the context that I wanted to provide with my partner, also Cynthia, was that we need to be really grateful that we are learning about this perspective, because we've done a lot of work in the grade 4-5 curriculum in social studies where we're learning about the discriminatory policies and actions. So it has a lot of richness in my classroom to go, well, was it easy to share our thoughts, or was it easy for the Indigenous people to share their thoughts, and were they often quieted? And so, okay, look at this amazing book. It's written by an Indigenous author who is brave enough to share a teaching that, storytelling is how the oral tradition is carried on and passed on from generation to generation. And just take pride and just a moment to, wow, look at this book. And so now that we've received this gift from this Indigenous author, we're going to go outside again, and we're going to look at another object. And we're not putting as much emphasis on juicy words, so to speak. We'll speak a little bit to it, but now, what is the most beautiful thing? And also mention, because I had an experience, a lot of us, am I running out of time? Western folks, an elder, when we went on a staff PD outdoors, he was like, oh, you white people just walk by everything. You don't see anything, and you walk on the plants. And so that's kind of, we want to pause and make them present and look at everything, all of those little pieces. And then we're going to look at it. And I thought it'd be neat. I really want to go back to that Indigenous piece of, my inspiration is Adrian Gear, another literacy guru, but I've written so some inferring, how might my object be used in the Indigenous culture? I think that's a cool way from our session the other night, math is medicine, and the grocery store, the pharmacy is all out there. What are we thankful to? We're thankful for the land and to the land, because it provides everything that you need. And so that's kind of another spin that we're taking. And then the numeracy piece is going to be looking at our object from like they get to choose either a bird's eye view or an ant view, and they sketch it. So there's some spatial awareness and abstract thinking. And then they get to choose to describe their or like do some numeracy tasks with their objects. So estimate the weight, estimate the length, estimate the height. That's pretty much it. And then show their thinking. And then our responses have that similar template. But what my second template is, I want them to look at their objects and say, how are they similar? How are they different? And then there's going to be a reflection page of what are you grateful for from your land, and how has your thinking about the Indigenous culture changed after this? And before we even get to the reflection, I want to do a word splash, or we're going to do a word splash of what did you get from this activity? What did you love about it? And then I want to be really intentional and say, all of this is because we had Richard Van Camp write this and be brave enough to share this teaching and gift with us. Look at this. Isn't this amazing? So that's it. Question or shush time now for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, I think unfortunately we have to stop. Thank you everybody for sharing. We want to thank you for attending this session, and if you attended the previous session, we want to thank you for attending both sessions. The recordings will be available first for the people who registered for these events, and then they will be available in the website. And we're asking for your feedback. There is a QR code that is in the information part, so you can find it there. Please send us all the feedback. And thank you so much. There is 5 minutes, I don't remember, Ariane, how many times, 5 minutes break, and you can go to the next session. Thank you so much, everybody.